Exercise 4 is all about motion tracking. Motion tracking is probably going to be the number one best way of you saving time and improving the quality of your roto splines. It's an absolutely invaluable stage of the process, especially if you're working with a moving camera. So let's take a quick look at what's going on here. Again, we've got a slightly steadier shot than we had last time, but it's still slightly wobbly. And it's these slight wobbles that are going to be really difficult to get out just by regular sort of hand keyframing, because there's such a load of very, very small movements. You probably end up making a new keyframe on pretty much every frame anyway. I've loaded in our footage, which is the signage footage, and started up a new session just with the Roto node in here. So let's take a look at what we're going to do with this. Again, I'm going to create a new layer here, and I am going to call this, we'll do this main sign up the top here, the observe and report sign, and we will call this, observe sign. And just with my layer selected, I've got enough information that I need now to be able to come in and do a motion track on it. So the motion track is this little icon down here, taking us to our tracker here, and we have two different types of tracker. We have a point tracker and a planar tracker. The planar tracker deserves a section all of its very own, so that's what it's going to get. We're going to be concentrating on our point tracker here. Now, point trackers are everywhere. Every compositing app has one, but there are some interesting features that Silhouette Effects point tracker has that helps to make it much more useful in this particular circumstance. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new tracker, and that puts it here dead center of my screen here. So let's change the color of our tracker so we can actually see the thing, and we're going to come up to our shape here, come to our bounding box, set this up really, really bright. Let's turn it white actually. Hit apply, hit OK. We can see that just maybe a little bit better. Very, very tiny bit better. Let's zoom in just a little bit so we can identify our tracker a bit more. So the point tracker itself comprises of three separate parts. So the central crosshair here is our center point, and this is the point which is going to be applied to our data. The inner box is our pattern that we're going to be tracking. That matches up to our inner box here. So the outer box, the dotted box, is our search area. So this is how far Silhouette is going to be looking to try and find a match for this pattern in here. So let's take a look at what we can do. So we'll come up and let's just bring this up here. So we're looking for good points for the tracker to look for. So what we're looking for in a good track is an area where there's good contrast and a recognizable pattern, hopefully with some sort of corner edges here. So good edges here. So pretty much all of this area around here with the text is going to be good for doing our point tracking. A bad area would be a point where there's actually not a lot of difference between the point that we've chosen and the surrounding areas. So a bad area would probably be somewhere like this here, where it could get quite easily confused by the flashing lights, and our point tracker will get lost at that particular area. Motion blur and noisy footage can also help to sort of mess things up quite a bit. But let's take a little look here just to begin with. Make this fairly small. Come up here, and we know our search area also should be very small because the amount of motion that we're going to be tracking is very, very small. So if we come down to our point tracker down here, we've got a few different controls. We can track one frame backwards, and you can see we've got our frame pops up here in green once it's been tracked, or we can track all frames backwards, track all frames forwards or track one frame forwards there. Now our behavior here is all about what pattern it is that we're looking for. So at the moment it's set to start frame. So the pattern it's looking for is the pattern that we set at the start frame. So the start frame here happened to be on frame 26. So this is the pattern that it's always going to be looking for. We could also change this to look every frame, so we have something that's changing quite rapidly. For example, a point that's changing shape. We can set this to every frame, so this will update every frame and look for a slightly different pattern each time. We can also set keyframes here as well, so that we can come in to a particularly difficult bit of footage and track a couple of keyframes and then use those as the basis for our track. But that's for the moment. Let's hit that to start. The tolerance is all about how flexible it is of looking for the pattern. A high tolerance means that it has to match this more and more to be sure that it's got an accurate track. And a low tolerance means that this pattern can change quite a lot without the tracker freaking out. So let's just set this up here and let's track this through. So I'm going to make this, open this up and make a slightly bigger search area. Oh, sorry, slightly bigger match size. And play it through. Now, if we're not getting good results, we might want to come and take a look at our pre-processing. So the pre-processing is just a way of coming in and adjusting our footage before it gets tracked. So in this case, let's turn our preview on here and we're seeing what the tracker is going to be seeing. So if I turn up the contrast here, we can get even better contrast going on in our little E here. If I turn a blur on slightly, it can take out some of that little pixel noise that might have been throwing the tracker off a little bit. So if we've got any flicker in the image here, any sort of lighting flicker, for example, we can click the remove flicker button here, and that will help to try and even things out. So let's come in, track that forwards. It's looking a bit better. Track it backwards. So if everything's good, this picture should be stable. And if we're happy with that, we can hit apply and it will apply it to the active layer. So at the moment we've only got position that we can do, but now if we come to our observe here, let's turn our timeline back on down here and you'll see, let's just hit F on that and actually come back into our tracker, turn our preview off, or actually it's just come straight back into the transform there. If you have a look, we've now got some small movement going on within our observe sign layer. And if you take a look at the timeline down here, you'll see we have keyframes set for each frame here. Now these keyframes are what's held in our matrix down here. So this is separate to the position, scale and rotation, so we can still come in and transform the layer as we would want to do normally. But we've got that added bonus of hopefully having some of the camera shake and camera judder taken out with the keyframes that are in the matrix there. So now we can come in, let's draw our trusty rectangle and reshape it. And I'll turn the opacity up here to 40 so we can see it a bit better. Now if I hit play here, that should have taken out all of the camera judder that we needed it to. It's a little bit shaky, but it's not bad. So if it's a little bit shaky but not bad, that's when we can come back into our tracker here. Come back into our track over here, and if we have our tracker selected here, we can now come in and smooth this out just a little bit. And this is a destructive smooth, so I'm just going to smooth it out just a tiny bit here. But what this will help to do, let's hit apply again. What this will help to do is it will help to just sort of take out some of the little glitches that we had in there before. And we'll see the effect of that actually update in real time on the path that we have here. It's just the path we have up here isn't particularly strong at the moment, so we're not seeing it in a particularly strong sort of way. What it has done is it has shifted our sign a little bit off, but we can just offset that again. Let's just delete that other keyframe so we don't get in trouble. Cool. And the nice thing is here we'll probably be able to use the same track on multiple parts of this billboard because they share pretty much the same plane. So let's come in here and attach this up here. There we go. It goes off screen a little bit, so I'm not that worried about the fact that they don't match up 100%. If I wanted to, I could match them up properly. But you can see that's really helps us out. Okay, so let's come out a little bit here, and we'll do one more here. And we'll take this guy here, this truck here. So this got a couple of things going for it. It's not just repositioning, it's also scaling and rotating a bit. So come in here and we'll call this van side. Why not? There we go, van side. Let's turn the other ones off for the time being, and I'm going to stick my tracker inside the observe sign there. Cool, so let's come back into our tracker over here and we'll start to track our van up a little bit. Cool, so let's create a tracker. And we'll put this one around about here. So I do want to make this a little bit bigger. And you can see in our preview here that we're really not getting any joy from what's going on in the point tracker. It's going to be quite tricky for the silhouette tracker to see. So we definitely need to turn our preview on here. Turn our contrast down. Turn our blur down. We can turn our sharpness on. And a bit of denoise as well. The denoise is different to the blur. So the blur is quick and blurs everything out. The denoise is more subtle and takes out some of that nasty noise. So here the sharpen's working quite nicely. Go on, I'm going to do something a little bit different as well. I'm going to add another tracker point to this too. I'm going to just hold down Alt and click, and that's another way of creating a tracker. So you've got another tracker 2 up here. And let's bring my match size in a little bit there as well. And let's match this up here. Cool, and with both trackers now selected, let's track this a couple of frames backwards. Because by adding multiple trackers together, this gives us actually quite a few new, oops, stop that there for a second, because our point's gone a bit awry. Everything's good there. So let's just select that one tracker and turn the match size down now because it's getting quite small. And then we'll track this one individually. Yeah, what I was saying was, as we've got multiple trackers going on here, it gives us a few more different possibilities for what we can do with the data. Let's just get that one going back. Cool, that's looking fine. Select this tracker here. We can see where it's finished tracking. It's at that point there. And we'll just track that one backwards and that should be fine there. Cool, so now with 2 trackers here, we've got several different options. One of them is to, if I hit apply here, I now have scaling and rotation open up for me as choices. And as you can see, we can, just apply the horizontal or the vertical data to this, but I'm going to apply everything here. Hit OK on that. Come out of our tracker and try transform. And you can see now, if we open up our van side here, we've still only got keyframes on the matrix, but the matrix is now scaling up and rotating around. And anytime we see a little bounce like that, we know that something's gone very, very badly wrong in our trackers, at least one of them. It looks like that one. So to fix that, I'm going to go one frame forward and then just track that one backwards. And that should, now if I have all those selected, hit apply, hit OK. That should now be fine. Cool. It's important when we do multiple trackers that are going to be used for scale and rotation that they do sit a comfortable distance away from each other, really as far away from each other as they comfortably can, and that they both sit on the same plane, that they both sit on the same object that's moving. So for example, we couldn't put one of our trackers here and then one of our trackers, back on the billboard here, because that doesn't describe the same type of movement, whereas having it both on the same side of the van here describes the same movement. So let's see how that works out in practice. Let's come back up to our transform here. Actually, we're going to come to the most complex frame, or the frame where we can see most of the stuff, which is this frame here. Come back to our trusty square and just mark this out here nice and quickly. And let's see how far that works. Do you know it's not 100%? As you can see, it's not 100%, but it is going to get us a little bit of the way there. Let's come into our transform there, and we'll use I'm holding down the Alt key to do a distort on that. And let's see what that gives us. Well, we're a lot closer, that's for sure. Now what you might have seen was we do have a bit of an issue sometimes with the trackers jumping about. So this leads me on to the next point, and we're going to track our sign again. Actually, we'll track this sign up here instead. Let's just dump these tracks into our van side there. Create another layer here, and I'll call this feral sign. And let's add a couple of tracking markers here. So let's come in, and I can just alt click as I've done before, alt click a couple of places, and I'm just going to create 3 tracking points. All these seem fine. I'm just maybe, no, I won't contrast it up too much. There we go. Let's just leave it there. Just have all of these selected here, and let's just track this forwards and see what happens. Now all of these seem to have tracked quite nicely, but they do have a little bit of jitter on them still. If we look down here, as I use the X key to move me to the next frame, you can see these are jumping around just a little bit. Now hopefully all of these have slightly different types of jitter that's going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have all of these 3 selected, hit average, and that's going to create another tracker up here, which is now tracker 6, which is the average track of, let's make this a slightly different colour. It's going to create an average track of the other 3. So any noise that we have should be cancelled out, and we can also use this to find the sort of centre point of 2 other objects. So now with just tracker 6 selected, I'm going to hit apply, hit OK, come back to my feral sign, actually come back to the transform here. Will feral, boop, boop, boop. Bring this over here to some place where we can see it. and hit play on that. And that should now give us a better overall track than just having one single point tracker just on its own. So it's actually really easy to set up multiple trackers and then average out the results that we get from those to give us one final result. And just to check that out, I'm just going to add a very quick Bezier spline. Super quick Bezier spline. Cool, I'm actually not even interested in getting that even remotely accurate. Just good enough that that we can see whether our track is working, and it has taken out most of that camera shake. Now again, this is a great time to come up to our stabilize, which we saw back in exercise 2, and this is the perfect time where you'd want to use it. Hit stabilize up there, then if you hit play, you can check to see whether your footage is still properly masked out or whether there is some slippage without having to get distracted by the rest of the camera movement. So that's a perfect time to be using that. Let's bring that over a little bit. Same here, bring this over just a tad. And then when you're happy with that, you click the stabilize on again to destabilize it, and you should end up with our nice Roto shape. You better get comfortable with the trackers because we are going to be using those liberally in the upcoming exercises. Now in the next exercise, which is exercise 5, we're going to be looking at articulated motion. So simply put, this is how we're going to break the rotoscoping of a human into practice. But we could also use the same techniques to do any sort of articulated motion. And we'll look at some of the challenges we have when we're dealing not only with a moving camera, but a moving subject that's moving in multiple directions. All right, but that is going to be in exercise 5. So I'll see you over there.